Close your eyes for a moment. Think back to a time when music could stop you dead in your tracks. When a guitar riff hit you somewhere deep in the chest that no words could quite describe. When you didn't just listen to a song, you felt it. For millions of people around the world, that feeling had a name: Jimi Hendrix. The man who rewrote the rules of electric guitar, the artist who made you believe that 6 strings and a Marshall stack could contain the entire universe. The performer who stood at Woodstock and turned the Star-Spangled Banner into something raw, something wounded, something undeniably true. But today, we're not here to celebrate the legend. We're here to talk about something more fragile than that, something more painful, something that haunted music fans for over 50 years. We're here to talk about what Jimi left behind. The date was September 18th, 1970. Jimi Hendrix was 27 years old. He was at the height of his creative powers. He had just spent months pouring himself into a new album, one that he believed would be his most personal, his most evolved, his most complete statement as an artist. That morning, he was found unresponsible at the Samarkand Hotel in London. The official cause of death was asphyxia. He had inhaled his own vomit after taking barbiturates. He was rushed to St. Mary Abbott's Hospital, but it was too late. The world had lost one of the most extraordinary voices, and that album he had been working on, it was unfinished. Now, if you're watching this and you're old enough to remember the early 70s, you'll understand what that moment felt like. It wasn't just the loss of a musician, it was a loss of a possibility, the loss of everything he still had left to say. Jimi had been recording at Electric Lady Studios in New York, the studio he'd had custom built for himself at an enormous expense. It was his dream studio, his creative sanctuary, and in the months before his death, he had been laying down track after track, experimenting, pushing forward, imagining a new sound. He spoke in interviews about the direction he was heading. He talked about combining rock and jazz and orchestral elements. He talked about deeper stories. He talked about growth. And then at 27, it was over, but the tapes remained. What happened next is one of the most fascinating and complicated stories in rock history. After Jimi died, the tapes from Electric Lady Studios and other sessions were in the hands of his producer and longtime collaborator, Eddie Kramer, one of the most talented recording engineers in the business, and Mitch Mitchell, the brilliant drummer who had been Jimi's bandmate since the very beginning of the Jimi Hendrix experience. Together, Kramer and Mitchell made a decision. They would take what Jimi had recorded, complete the arrangements as faithfully as they could to his intentions, and release it as an album. They worked on it for months. They had access to the final vocal takes, guitar overdubs, and rhythm tracks that Jimi himself had approved. In some cases, the tracks were essentially finished. In others, they had to make careful judgment calls about how to blend the elements together. It's important to say this clearly. The Cry of Love is not some cobbled together cash grab. It's not a collection of outtakes. This was a material that Jimi had been actively developing, tracks he had devoted enormous creative energy to, songs he fully intended for the world to hear. When the album was released in March 1971, which I believe is March 5th, 1971, and it's celebrating 55 years, it was only about 6 months after his death, and it stunned the music world. Here was Jimi Hendrix, more mature, more soulful, more emotionally open than ever before. He was an artist in the process of becoming something even greater than the legend he had already been. The album reached number 2 in the UK charts and number 3 in the United States. Critics recognized immediately that this was not a posthumous mythology. This was genuine, substantial work. Rolling Stone called it essential. Fans wept, listened on repeat, and wore out their vinyl. For those of us who came of age in the late 60s and early 70s, me personally, I was born the year this came out in 1971, and I bought this CD. I was, I guess, 18 or 19 years old. I was maybe like in the late 80s, early 90s. I saw this. I didn't know what it was. I picked it up at the record store, and I've always liked it. And I still have the original CD. I don't have the original box, but I have the booklet here, and I'll be showing pictures from the booklet throughout this video. But it was a goodbye letter. The last time we got to sit down with Jimi and hear something new and what he had to say, and it was extraordinary. The album opens with a statement of pure Jimi Hendrix intent. Freedom kicks in with that instantly recognizable guitar tone. It was raw, aggressive, and alive. And it hits you right between the eyes. Not a man looking backward, a man charging forward. The song is, at its core, a declaration of independence. Jimi is singing about breaking free from constraint from the music industry, from the expectations people have put on him, from the commercial pressures that were beginning to weigh on him heavily in the last year of his life. By 1970, Jimi had become one of the most commercially successful rock acts in the world, but success had come with a price. He was frequently at odds with his management. He was exhausted from touring. He felt, in many ways, trapped. And freedom, he was singing about wanting out of that cage. There's something in that message that resonates across generations. If you were a teenager in 1970, you were living through the fracture of the peace movement, the weight of Vietnam, the crumbling of the optimism that had defined the late 60s. Freedom wasn't just a song title, it was a word everyone was reaching for. Musically, it showcases exactly where Jimi was heading. The rhythm section is tighter, more deliberate than his early work. Guitar work is less about pyrotechnics and more about precision, about saying exactly what he meant to say, note by note. There are moments in Freedom where the guitar sounds almost conversational, like Jimi is speaking directly to you, like he knows you're listening. And that's what makes The Cry of Love so extraordinary. It feels personal in a way that even his earlier masterpieces sometimes didn't. If Freedom is a declaration, then Ezy Ryder is a full-throated celebration. The song is quintessential, I can't pronounce that word, but it's quintessential Jimi, enormous riffs, thunderous rhythm work from Mitch Mitchell on drums, the unstoppable forward momentum. When Ezy Ryder comes on, you don't just sit still, you can't. But here's what's fascinating about Ezy Ryder. On the surface, it looks like pure rock and roll excess, the kind of free-spirited highway anthem that defined the era of Ezy Ryder, the movie, the one with motorcycles and open roads and the spirit of rebellion. And on one level, it absolutely is that. But dig a little deeper and you find something more complicated. Jimi was writing about freedom, yes, but also people who chase it without ever finding it. About the restless souls who ride forever and never quite arrive anywhere. There's a melancholy underneath the thunder. For those of us who were young in that era, the duality makes perfect sense. The 70s were right around the corner, and with that came a kind of morning after feeling. The 60s had promised so much. Revolution, peace, a new world, and here was Jimi, riding hard into the music, celebrating the journey while quietly wondering where it's all going. Ezy Ryder features some of the most ferocious guitar work on the entire album. The solo is a masterclass, not showing off, but in storytelling. Every bend, every hammer-on, every screaming note is in service of the emotional truth of the song. Now, you listen to it now, 55 years later, it sounds completely fresh. Sounds like someone made it yesterday. That's the mark of music that genuinely transcends its era. It stands as a reminder, Jimi Hendrix, even in what would turn out to be the final chapter of his life, his playing was better than almost anyone else on the planet. Now we come to the song that stops you. The song that, even now, causes people to sit down whatever they're doing and just listen. Belly Button Window closes The Cry of Love, and it's unlike anything else in the Jimi Hendrix catalog. It's unlike almost anything else in rock and roll, period. The song is sung from the point of view of an unborn child, a soul looking out at the world from inside the womb, wondering whether it wants to come out into it. Think about that for a moment. In 1970, recorded in the months before Jimi's death and released in March 1971, Jimi Hendrix wrote a song in which an unborn child surveys the chaos of the world and contemplates whether it's worth being born into it. Lyrics are gentle, almost childlike in their simplicity. Jimi's voice is stripped of all his rock and roll swagger. There are no pyrotechnic guitar solos here, just acoustic warmth, a delicate melody, and the most intimate vocal performance of his career. And the words are heartbreaking. The unborn soul looks out through the belly button, imagined as the kind of window onto the world, and sees people fighting, sees pain and confusion and conflict, and says, simply, maybe I'll come back another time. In 1970, this was considered eccentric, mystical perhaps, a little strange. Today, it reads as something else entirely. Think about the world in which we live in right now. Think about the conversations happening today. What kind of world children are being born into? Think about the war in Iran, fears that young parents carry when they think about the future, about the genuine question asked with increasing frequency by people in their 20s and 30s. Should we even be bringing children into this? Jimi Hendrix was asking that question in 1970. He was writing about it with compassion, with gentleness, without a shred of cynicism, just honest, open-eyed wonder at the strangeness and difficulty of human existence. And he was doing it in a form that had never been done before. The unborn narrator, the view from inside the womb, the gentle, almost cosmic perspective on the world below. Scholars and music critics have revisited Belly Button Window many times over the decades. Some have suggested that, given how close to death Jimi was when he recorded it, the song might be read as something even deeper, as Jimi himself looking at the world from a threshold, wondering whether to stay or to go. Whether or not that reading is accurate, it gives the song a weight that's almost unbearable. There are recordings of Jimi in the studio during the making of his album, laughing and joking with the engineers, full of energy and ideas. By all accounts, he was not a man who felt he was dying. He was a man who felt he was just getting started. And yet, Belly Button Window exists, that fragile, extraordinary, and possibly ahead of its time closing track. It's a song about hope and doubt simultaneously. A song about the impossible weight of bringing new life into an imperfect world. A song that in 1971 was gently radical, and in 2026 feels like a mirror held up to everything we are wrestling with. Jimi Hendrix was 27 years old when he recorded it. Let that sit with you. The Cry of Love was followed by a flood of posthumous releases, some authorized, some not, and for many years listeners struggled to know what represented Jimi's true vision and what was someone else's interpretation of it. But The Cry of Love holds a special place because of the care taken by Kramer and Mitchell, because of the quality of the material, because of the fact that Jimi himself had been actively shaping the recordings in the final weeks of his life. This is the album he wanted to make. This is the artist he was becoming, and for those of us who grew up with Jimi's music, who wore out our copies of Our Experience, who played Electric Ladyland until the grooves were nearly gone, Cry of Love is something else profoundly precious. Is the answer to the question we always asked ourselves, where would he have gone next? Deeper, that's where he's going, more soulful, more personal, more willing to be vulnerable and raw and honest in a way that might have surprised even his most devoted fans. The freedom he sang about, the restless energy of Ezy Ryder, the quiet cosmic wonder of Belly Button Window, all of it points toward an artist who had only scratched the surface of what he was capable of, and that is a tragedy. And that is also, in a strange way, the gift, because what he left us is complete in its incompleteness. It captures a moment of pure becoming, a genius in motion, moving towards something extraordinary, suddenly, heartbreakingly stopped. So here's what I'd like you to do. If you haven't listened to The Cry of Love in a while, put it on tonight, sit with it in the dark, the way you used to sit with music when you were young. Let it take you back. Let it take you somewhere new. If you've never heard it, there's no shame in that. It's been unfairly overshadowed by his earlier work for decades. Consider this your personal invitation. Start with freedom. Feel the electricity. Move on to Ezy Ryder. Let the road open up. And then when you're ready, sit quietly for a Belly Button Window. Let Jimi ask you the oldest question in the world. Leave a comment below. Tell me your memories of Jimi. Tell me where you were when you first heard him. And tell us what The Cry of Love means to you. And I actually did a video of this showing this exact same CD exactly 5 years ago for its 50th anniversary. I will stick it right there. This should be appearing on your screen. And thanks for watching. Please like this video. It helps me with the music, helps me with the whatever, the YouTube algorithm. And like and subscribe, all that good stuff. See you in the next one.